All rise. Vuelve. Please be seated.
Thank you very much, and witness, welcome back. Mr. Steinbach, please continue.
Thank you, Your Honours. Before I continue with the questioning, I should just indicate that my colleague, Mr. Garcia, and I briefly met with the witnesses just before we resumed, and in particular to ask him whether it would be possible to plot certain additional information on his map, such as that raised by the President earlier, regarding to areas of interest. I explored with him the possibility of being able to superimpose other available map images, such as Google Maps, on the data he's provided. He explained that that would be technically not possible. But if we were to provide him with a list of areas of interest, areas that might have been spoken about by various previous witnesses, I won't mention those areas in public session, he would overnight be able to plot those particular points of interest on one or more of the maps which he's provided to the Chamber. Would that be of assistance to the Chamber?
Mr. President, we think that that's already been done, and the reports provided by the learned expert will attest to that fact. And during cross-examination, we'll be able to show that that exercise has in fact already been done. But we do not think that it is right for the prosecution to try to fatten a cow in a market day. Work that needed to have been done 2 years ago cannot be done overnight with this witness. But we think that that is absolutely unnecessary. The areas of interest are known to all: Huruma, Langas, Yamumbi, and Kimumu for Greater Eldoret, and Kiamba Church. All the others are absolutely unnecessary. And that work has already been done and is very evident in the material already provided. So it would be improper or unfair to burden the expert to look at certain areas overnight, which if the prosecution needed that information, they should have done so 2 years ago when the expert was instructed. Thank you, Mr. President. If for some reason, after cross-examination, we have not been able to elicit relevant information, the judges are at liberty to ask for that information or to task the expert to provide some further information. But at this stage, I think it is improper to go as suggested by the prosecution. Thank you, Mr. President. Another thing is that we were hoping, honestly, that we would finish with this witness today. And we still hope that that objective is still possible. Thank you.
Mr. King-Katwa, do you have anything to add?
Just one observation, Your Honours, that if the prosecution are allowed to improve on their case through the device they have sought, it will be such a process that we would not have had notice of and would not have been prepared to handle. And we would oppose on that ground, Your Honours.
Yeah, but Mr. Fowl indicates that you've had ample notice of it. He's saying that it isn't necessary to do it.
Yes, to the extent to which it has been done, we have notice. The areas that the prosecution proposed to introduce are areas that then we wouldn't have had notice of, Your Honours.
Mr. Steinbach, let's proceed in this way. Let's not do that now. If that is an additional exercise you had in mind, other than what you were planning to do, as Mr. Fowl says that the list of areas indicated, outlined in this witness's testimony, he said, have already been covered. It may well be that in asking him the questions, you may be able to get that anyway. short of having him overnight, as you suggested, go do overlaying of maps and that sort of thing. And if at the end of it the information is not sufficiently clear, we will see if the witness can do that in the course of the cross-examination. If not, then we'll return to that question. But as I was saying during my own, when I raised this matter before, I thought that would have been the core brief of this witness, as it were. But it seems like you had a different sort of trajectory in mind. We'll proceed.
Your Honour, if I can just clarify one or two things. The core brief of this witness was to provide evidence of the areas covered, the incidents alleged in the DCC, and those are the incidents that are projected on the maps. This suggestion was prompted by a query from the Chamber relating to witnesses before the court who had spoken to, for instance, predominantly Kikuyu areas that they said were targeted. Those areas do not necessarily coincide exactly with the points on the map. And thus, it was the query from the Chamber which prompted this exercise or this suggestion. And therefore, it's not that the prosecution is trying to fatten the cow, it's that the prosecution is trying to provide the Chamber with information which the Chamber has indicated it might find useful.
Some may say that that question shouldn't even have been instigated by the Chamber. I do not want to comment too much on that, in the sense that in the course of investigation, of course, before the witness himself is briefed, the testimonies of investigation of the prosecution may have zeroed in on areas that the argument may be made later that, look, there's a pattern of attacks, and this pattern tends to show victimization of Kikuyus in particular, and expert witness comes to verify that. That is why he should have been part of the case to begin with. That's the point I'm making. But we will continue.
As the court pleases. Mr. Witness, before the adjournment, we were about to commence with the report on the satellite imagery of Kiamba, and for the record again, the ERN number is 00921380 at tab 3 of your binder. And would I be correct in saying that, in general, the modus operandi and analysis you performed in this report is very similar to that performed in the Eldoret report we've just spoken about?
Yes.
In particular, I draw your attention to page 1 of the report at ERN 1382, and I note that the dates of the images you used were 14 December 2005 and 4th of January 2008, respectively, correct?
Correct.
So the after image, as it were, is on the same date, the 4th of January.
Yes, it's in fact a different section of the previously mentioned image.
Finally, it's the same satellite and the same resolution as the previous image, correct?
Correct.
Turning over then to the next page, ERN 1383. Similar to the previous report, does that depict the red square in that image depict the outer boundary of the area you analyzed for the purpose of this report?
Yes.
And once again, we notice that the rectangle is offset so that north would be towards the left top corner of that quadrant, correct? The red quadrant.
Mr. President, if it helps, we have indicated to my learned friend opposite that we do not have any objection to anything contained in the report on the KenyaMOJA Church. So he can put in the report with all the findings contained in it, agreed to by the defense. So that way we could shorten the time. Thank you.
It's a Keegan Katwa.
That is similarly our position, Your Honor.
So you, to be clear, you do accept the conclusions in the report in relation to KenyaMOJA Church?
To the extent that KenyaMOJA Church was destroyed by burning. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Steinberg, that it seems to help matters, doesn't it?
It does indeed help matters, Your Honours. My experience has unfortunately shown that if expert reports are simply handed in and one moves on, when the time comes to assess those reports, questions often arise which should have been dealt with and could have been dealt with when the expert was there to answer them. I certainly don't intend to go through this report in any great detail, but I would just like to highlight one or two issues. Your Honours will notice I've been leading the witness and we're progressing very rapidly. If I may be given a little bit of space, we should finish this report within the next 10 minutes at the maximum.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honours. Moving on swiftly then to Figure 2 on year-end 1384. It appears that from that image, if I'm correct, the overlap between the before and after pictures was quite close.
Correct. The January 2008 image is less than 1 square kilometer larger than the December 2005 image.
Turning then to your results, which have been admitted on page 1385, is it correct that you were able to determine in this area of examination 123 buildings destroyed, almost all apparently by fire, of which 93 were identified as definitely destroyed and 30 possibly destroyed?
Correct.
And to the next page, 1386, does that again represent by red squares and orange squares, respectively, plotted on the map, the locations of the destroyed and possibly destroyed buildings?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, the KenyaMOJA Church is annotated there by a blue dot towards the top left-hand corner. And if one turns over to page 1387, year-end 1387, is it correct that that represents before and after images of the burnt church at KenyaMOJA?
It represents before and after of a burned building, but having never been there, I don't know what the building is, but those were the coordinates I were given for KenyaMOJA Church.
I see. So the KenyaMOJA annotation was information provided to you by the OTP?
Correct.
The following figure, figure 5, can you tell the court what is the significance of that figure that you represented in your report?
This was, figure 5 was provided as an additional example of definitely destroyed structures in the area southeast of KenyaMOJA Church.
Thank you. And then finally, your conclusions are represented on page 1389, and I don't think it's necessary to reread those again. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Bromley. Your Honours, I'll move on then from this report. If I can ask you to turn to tab number 4, Mr. Bromley. Can you identify this as your third report, the analysis of fire detection in Eldoret, Kenya, relating to post-election violence in 2008.
Have we introduced the Kemba report?
I'm going to ask him to... the Campbell report, yes, we did that before the luncheon adjournment, Your Honour.
It is already exhibit.
That's correct. And as soon as the witnesses identified this report, I propose to repeat that process.
Yes, this is my report on fire detections in Eldoret.
And once again, you confirm it's your work and the correctness of the report.
Yes.
Your Honours, once again, then I would ask that this be exhibited. And this time there are no additional files to go with it. It's just this single report. It has various annexes, but they're all part of the same bundle.
Accepted as the next of the prosecution exhibits.
Le document KEN-OTP.
Document KEN-OTP 00920882 is a public document and will be given the EVD number T EVD T OTP 00054.
Thank you, Your Honours. Now, it may be necessary to explain in a little bit more detail at this stage about modus fire detection. I know you've already given a brief introduction. But let's start with what data you managed to obtain relating to the fire detection data for Kenya, and in particular for the area of interest.
Okay. So as mentioned, the MODIS sensors are flown on two different satellites operated by the U.S. Space Agency, NASA. These are the Terra and Aqua satellites. They overpass the entire world between 2 and 4 times per day. They're collecting imagery, or they're collecting data in multiple reflected light wavelengths. They're also measuring thermal emissions, so thermal heat data from the surface of the Earth. As that data is downloaded to NASA, a series of automated processes are run on that data, which are examining each pixel acquired by the satellite and essentially assessing it for whether it is a possible occurrence of a fire or not a fire. It simply does that by essentially taking two different thermal wavelengths and comparing them, comparing that pixel to surrounding pixels and areas where the computer detects a great increase in the thermal temperature of a particular pixel compared to other pixels around it. That is denoted as a fire pixel. All this data is then stored on a NASA computer system, which is publicly accessible. Then I simply access that data, download it, and analyze it for this particular area or any other area.
And I can perhaps lead you on this. Is it correct that you downloaded this data from the whole period of November 2000 through to September 2012 for the whole of Kenya?
Correct.
And what is this sort of data useful for? Is it more useful for detecting individual events or detecting patterns of fire or thermal anomaly events?
At this point, it has a variety of uses. It is used by national firefighting agencies, for example. to monitor remote areas for outbreaks of fire. It's also used by the scientific research community, for example, for understanding carbon emissions resulting from burning, and a great many other applications in between. So you can use it both to assess an individual fire event and also to assess kind of the long-term fire record.
Is this tool able to distinguish between the type of fire and the causes of the fire or not?
No, it's simply a binary value of is it a fire or is it not a fire.
Mr. Steinberg, where are we going with this line of questions?
Your Honour, what I'm going to show is ask the witness to testify on now is a pattern of fire detections over the relevant time. The only reason I'm going through this is that the value or the interpretation of those results are coloured by the sort of things that this data can and cannot show the court. But perhaps this is a little bit more detail than is required. Let me move on, and if there are any questions the court have, then perhaps we can clear that up later.
It's not about clearing up any questions the court has. It's about making sure that there's value to it. Definitely, it's an interesting science and description of it, but we want to keep it relevant for our needs. We began this morning with the indication that there has been an admission as to arson having been committed. We don't want the witness to testify that there are burnings and those burnings amounted to arson. That's a waste of our time. But if we can move away from that, if that is what you are planning to do with this line of questions, it may be a waste of time in light of the admissions. But if you're planning to do something else that has other forensic value, then you can let me know now.
Yes, Your Honour, I'll let you know right now. The previous analysis done on the high-resolution photographs has established what has already partially been admitted, that a great number of houses were burnt in the relevant areas. The question which remains unanswered at this stage is when those houses were burnt. We have not had an admission that houses were burnt in the relevant areas during the time frame covered by the charges, and the Chamber is aware that that is an issue which has been litigated in the past, and I imagine it is a matter which the defence will seek to make something of at the end of this case when we reach the end. So this witness will be able to provide certain data which will assist the court in my submission to attach a chronological or a temporal stamp to the destruction which he has already testified about.
Mr. President, we have agreed certain facts, and if that is to have any meaning, if it to bear any dividends, at least it should shorten the process that we are going through. If we have to go back over all the issues that have been agreed, then there would be no meaning to this. We have agreed the report. That is something I had indicated earlier, that we have agreed that the reports and all the conclusions can go in. So I think it would suffice if Learned Counsel can just read out the conclusion, put it to the witness. Once he endorses it, that should be fine. But that is a way that could help sorting this process.
All right, let's narrow down what's in litigation now as to the arson, period of arson. Mr. Steinberg, you're saying that there has been admissions, but this witness is going to prove the period during which the arsons were committed. Is that what you're saying? And what are those? What would be those periods, so that we can narrow it down and get the defense to see whether they're contesting it?
Your Honor, proving the period might be putting it a bit too high. But what he is going to do, and if I can maybe just turn the Court's attention directly to page 5 of the report at 0888, is he will demonstrate that on the 1st of January there was a significant spike in the number of fires detected in the Uasin Gishu area, which would correspond then with the prosecution's period of charging and also with his analysis of the burnt structures that he's previously testified to. Taking into account my learned friend's admissions, I can simply take the witness to that, confirm that issue, and then we can be done with this report.
All right. Mr. Fowl, are you disputing that on the 1st of January there was a significant spike to the arson incident?
Mr. President, we do not dispute the finding in the report that on 1 January there was a significant spike on fires detected. That is the extent of our admission. The witness cannot testify as to the cause of those fires because the witness, as he said, was never present there. Thank you.
Mr. Kiginkatwa?
That is exactly the same position we have here, Your Honors.
With that admission done, as indicated by counsel, Mr. Steinberg, can you proceed?
Thank you. It will be very brief then. I just would like to differentiate between Figure 3, which is entitled Fire Detection Dynamics within Uasin Gishu District. Is it correct that that indicates the modus detection data for the political district of Uasin Gishu that you analyzed? Is that correct?
Correct.
And the corresponding table on Figure 5 at ERN 0890, if you just turn the page, you'll see a similar document. That is the same data, but for a slightly different area. It's an area of a 30-kilometer radius of Eldoret, Kenya, also showing a spike of fire detection on the 1st of January.
Correct, with Eldoret, Kenya being an approximate center point at the center of the town.
All right. And your conclusion then on the next page is that the analysis indicates the highest ever level of fire detections in Uasin Gishu district and Eldoret area on the 1st of January 2008, coinciding with the reports of violence.
Correct.
Thank you, Your Honours. We can move on from that report. The final report, and this will be very brief.
Have you tendered it?
I believe we have before we started, yes. The final report, Your Honours, is at tab 5, entitled An Analysis of Potential Travel Times in Kenya. Do you confirm again this is your work and the accuracy of the contents?
Yes.
Before we exhibit it, if I could just bring one possible correction to your attention. If you could look at the table on page 3 of the report, which is at 0920. It's entitled Table 1, Straight Line Distances and Helicopter Travel Between ICC Locations of Interest. You have that?
Yes.
I draw your attention to the 7th entry, location number 2, which currently reads Kisumu. Do you have that?
Yes.
If you look at the previous entry, which gives a distance between Sugoi House and Kisumu, the distance is indicated as 81 kilometers. The entry to which I've drawn your attention indicates the same 2 points, but gives the distance of 13 kilometers. It seems that one of those locations is incorrect.
Yes.
With reference to the table on the following page, which provides the same list of locations, can you tell the court what the correction should be?
The correction should be Kipkaran.
Thank you. So, for clarity of the record, on 0920, the seventh entry, location number 2, instead of Kisumu, should read Kipkaran, correct?
Correct.
So there will be then 2 Kipkarans, is that it?
That is correct, Your Honour. There will be 2 Kipkarans in a row as location 2, but location 1 is different, so it measures distances from different points. Subject to that correction, then, Your Honours, may I ask that this exhibit, which is ERN KenOTP 00920917, be admitted and exhibited.
Document admitted as the next of the prosecution exhibit.
Le document public KEN.
Public document KENOTP 00920917 shall be assigned the following number: EVD T OTP 00055.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honours. Now, this document largely speaks for itself, but is it correct, Mr. Bromley, you were asked to provide approximate distances and travel times from various specified locations, both by air and by road?
Yes, that is correct.
By air, you mean helicopter?
Your Honours, yes, I was getting to that. And as far as the air travel is concerned, you've provided at Table 1 distances by helicopter based on 2 types of helicopter. One you've designated as fast and the other designated as slow, correct?
Correct.
Similarly, for travel by road, you've provided, again, distances by road and travel times by a car traveling at a certain fast speed and a car traveling at a slower speed, which you have detailed in your report, correct?
Correct.
And this is all subject to the various caveats which you have set out fully in your report. Is that right?
Yes.
That is all I intend to lead at this stage on that report, Your Honours. There are just 2 further documents I need to deal with briefly that appear at tabs 8 and 9. And these are documents that do not have accompanying reports. So I'm going to ask the witness just to explain what they are and what their significance is. Turning to tab 8, I refer to document KenOTP 00921514. Can you tell the court, please, what is represented by these diagrams?
These were maps produced by my current employer, my current organization, Unisat, but at the time I was not working there. So these were produced by colleagues who were there previously. They are a graphical representation of the same MODIS fire detection data, which is mentioned in the report we previously discussed.
And the modus operandi of putting this sort of report together, would that be the same as the report that you put together?
Yes, basically, indicating large increases in fire detections within a certain time frame.
And again, all the caveats relating to gaps and cloud cover would equally apply, is that correct?
Yes.
What we see in this report is, chronologically, it seems to start in the bottom right-hand corner and progress up to the top left-hand corner, so reverse chronology, as it were. Again, we see a bloom of, or a significant increase of fires in the greater Uasin Gishu and surrounding areas on the 1st of January. That being a fair summary of these maps.
Yes, the only thing I should add or point out is NASA has gone through several iterations of their processing algorithm for this. And which version was in use in January 2008, I can't say. The results should be nearly identical, though.
Unless there are any objections, Your Honours, I propose to exhibit this document as well.
Mr. President, if it helps, we would object to admission of this report because the witness does not have any first-hand knowledge of it. He wasn't present when it was prepared. He just happened to work for the same organization, saw the report, deemed it relevant, and therefore submitted it. We do not think that that is sufficient, really, for the admission of this document. The reports that he has worked on, has prepared, and has seen the underlying data, we have no objection to it. But on this occasion, it doesn't appear that he has seen the underlying data or examined the underlying data in order to determine whether, in fact, what is represented in this document is, in fact, accurate. We have no knowledge of that, and therefore, in all fairness, it ought not to be admitted. Thank you.
Mr. President, additionally to the arguments made in objection to its production, is the admission by the witness himself that he doesn't know the formula that was used and that the formula has since changed.
May I just inquire before Your Honours renders a decision whether or not the witness has himself taken any steps to verify this data? It might be.
I was coming to that. So why don't you see what are essentially the defense's objection is lack of foundation, as it were. Are you able to lay the foundation to why this witness should be the one tendering this document?
Let me try to do that, Your Honours. Otherwise, we can possibly deal with it by way of bar table at a later stage. Mr. Bromley, you've told us that you weren't employed at the time when this data was collected. Have you done any work to verify the results and the correctness of these documents?
Due to time limitations, I didn't recover the old map production files and compare them with my files with the data that I had downloaded. At a glance, they're certainly almost identical, as near as I could tell. They are in my organization's archives. They are available on our website. They've never been disputed by anyone who's reviewed them. So I did not evaluate them in detail, but I didn't see anything wrong with them.
When you say that they are nearly identical to what?
So the data that I download from NASA is indicating the location of fire detections just as a latitude and longitude. It's a point. So the fire icons on the map we just looked at is also a point indicating fire, and the 2 points would be almost identical based on the short look that I took at them.
So you're saying that what the information apparent from this material are identical to your own analysis? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the data sources are the same, with the caveat being that I'm not entirely sure what version of the algorithm NASA was using at that time, but any differences in the results would be extremely small and may not even affect this particular area.
Mr. President, we wish to observe that this report covers a much greater geographical location. This covers Western and almost all of Rift Valley. The reports that the learned expert dealt with pertained mainly to Eldoret. So therefore, the information that is captured in this report is a whole lot broader than what the expert was expected to look at. And as such, it would be difficult for anyone to accept at this stage that what is contained, what is represented in this report is identical with what he has looked at, because we have no information that he has looked at.
Isn't this something you can explore in cross-examination?
We think it should be dealt with now because it deals with the admissibility of this particular document, because this is a whole lot broader than what the expert looked at. And as such, the information that he was seized with could not have provided sufficient information for him to assess whether what is contained in this report is in fact accurate, simply because he received less information. We do not know that, at least we've not been provided with any material from him pertaining to, say, Nyanza or in Western Kenya. And this report covers all those areas. So all we are saying is the information he has may very well be almost identical with what is contained in here with regards to Eldoret. But certainly it does not extend to Nyanza or Western, areas which he did not examine. Thank you.
Your Honours, if I can just point out that the witness did say that he had received modus data for the whole of Kenya, not just for the Uasin Gishu district, although that was the only part that was the subject of his actual report.
The witness does say that there is an extent to which the document now on the screen provides identical information with the one with his own analysis. To that extent, we will admit the document, and the rest we will deal with in...
Much obliged.
Yes, in the process of arguments.
Yes.
Le document KEN.
Document KENOTP 00921514, a public document, shall be assigned the following number: EVD T OTP 00056.
Thank you, Your Honours. On the same basis, then, I would like to ask the witness to turn to tab 9 and look at document KEN OTP 00921515, which is a similar but slightly more detailed map of what appears to be the same area, modus fire detections of the same area. Can you confirm that, Mr. Witness?
Yes.
And since this is dated the 3rd of January, do I also assume that you were not employed at that time that it was produced?
I was not employed at UNICEF.
I beg your pardon, that's what I meant. Finally, as with the last image, are you able to give the Chamber any indication of any verification or otherwise reliability of this data?
My previous comments would be the same for this one.
How do you correlate what we're looking at now with the previous document we saw with 4 slides, as it were, represented?
Your Honor, I think what the mapmaker did at the time, instead of splitting the data into 4 time periods, they combined it all into one map. So they showed multiple days within a single map. But it's the same data.
Mr. President, we raise similar objections because you could see that it's getting murkier because there is a bit of guesswork as to how this map was produced, simply because the witness was not present, and it's unfair to put him in a position where he would have to guess as to how the data was put together. We think that this piece of evidence should be rejected, considering also that it came from a different organization, UNICEF. It makes it even more remote for this particular witness. For that reason, it should be rejected.
Correction to my learned friend, both of these documents come from UNICEF, which is the organization the witness works for.
UNOSAT.
And with respect, Your Honours, there's no guesswork required because what is on these documents is stated quite clearly in the title. The first document, which is in fact the later of the 2 documents dated the 4th of January, is entitled Active Fire Locations Detected with Modus, in brackets 27 December 2007 to 3 January 2008. And the second one, Active Fire Locations Detected by Modus, 27 December to 2 January 2008. So it's fairly clear that the one is split into 4 periods, or the other one is one picture depicting the entire period. I don't think there's any speculation required.
But, Mr. President, we think that that is not enough. If the OTP really wanted this witness to give an expert opinion as to what is contained in these documents, they should have briefed him accordingly and get him to look at the underlying data. But he has not looked at the underlying data. The only thing we know is it came from particular organizations. We're not disputing the credibility of those organizations or the fact that they would come up with maps with wrong data. But what we are saying is the indicia for reliability, it's not there. This witness has no connection with these particular documents. Putting these documents through the witness would be stretching the rules. He has no connection with them. It is like getting a document prepared by another organization and say, oh, take a look at this. It's similar to what you have looked at, and therefore it can be admitted. The OTP did indicate that the witness looked at all information from Kenya, but that information is not before us. It's not before the court. What is before the court is information about Eldoret. This is a whole
Mr. Fowl.
Yes, Mr. President.
You know the rules about business records. Does the keeper of the records have to be the person who actually created it?
For purposes of admissibility, Mr. President.
It's different. In other words, I'm saying, would this be different from what one may call in other courts a business record?
Yes, in this particular instance, because this is opinion evidence. This is opinion of another person. This witness is here to offer his own opinion. He has not had privy to the underlying data. It's difficult for him to sit here and say, well, this is accurate, this is correct, you can rely on it, simply because he has not had access to the underlying data. Thank you.
Mr. President, I will make reference to what the witness said at page 96, like 17 to 20. And he disowns this report in these words. Yes, the only thing I should add or point out is that NASA has gone through several iterations for processing algorithms, and which version was in use in January 2008, I can't say. The result should be nearly identical though. Mr. President and Your Honors, we emphasize on his use of the word various versions, and also on his use of the words nearly identical.
What is this thing, Mr. Kiginkato, what does this document show that is troubling you so?
Me in terms of Mr. Sang or me?
The defense.
Mr. President, our concern is that we expect that this witness can come and justify the opinions he has arrived at in his reports, which is the basis of his having been called.
What is that opinion that is troubling you? That's what I'm getting at. You see, you've made certain admissions. Does this document simply not show that there were burnings in the area? Isn't it what it shows?
Mr. President,
and possibly, if we might even pinpoint it more accurately, if one can even go that far. The best one can say there was a spike on the 1st of January 2008, if we're able to even interpret that out of this. But even if we did that, that is what will happen, isn't it? Isn't that a conclusion?
Mr. President, the prosecution have taken the witness through the process, the data, the raw data you used to arrive at the...
No. So we don't talk all over the place and then still end up in the same place. What I'm saying is, if this document already contains, or rather shows no more than what you have admitted, then why are we objecting? Supposed to, if it shows something else that is in dispute, then we have a real reason to object, isn't it?
We must come from the position, Mr. President, that these two documents show something different from what, or some particular details which the prosecution have not been able to produce through the witness in the reports he already made himself. And that's why they want to introduce them. Mr. President, if these reports show exactly the same thing that he had done, then there would be no reason for the prosecution to seek to produce them.
The document will be admitted. Again, we know, we've noted the limits of this witness's testimony as to the identity between what his own analysis shows and what this document shows. We know that.
Much obliged.
Then that leaves one final issue, Your Honours, and that relates to the...
Merci, Monsieur Steinberg.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Document KenOTP 00921515. Public document will have the EBD number TOTP 00057.
Thank you, Your Honours. The final issue I referred to was the CD, which forms part of the bundle we've handed up. Now, the CD contains files, PDF files, of all of the documents that have previously been admitted, but they are in a format which is of higher quality than that which is contained in Ringtail. My request, Your Honours, would be to hand this in as a real exhibit, and the parties, if they wish to, at a later stage, examine more closely any of the areas contained in these files, would be able to do so far more usefully on with those documents. And I do this bearing in mind that if one day this issue might end up on appeal, the judges on appeal might not have been in the position to have heard these explanations and might themselves want to examine the evidence in more detail, as indeed Your Honours might wish to do several months down the line. So I ask that the CD KenOTP 01300038 be admitted as a real exhibit.
Have you given copies to the defence?
Indeed, Your Honours, all parties and the bench have copies.
We have received a copy. We wonder, though, whether this should be a real exhibit or just a working document for us. The exhibits have already been put in, but we leave it in your honest hands.
We will admit the CD-ROM then. Mr. Kigen-Katwa, I didn't ask you.
Mr. President would be surprised. I wasn't going to oppose it.
You were not. Good.
Your Honours, in case my learned friend's having any difficulty, I'm told that it's not uploaded in eCourt yet. So if that presents a problem, then it may be necessary to do this at a later stage. We can just note it for now and proceed with it later.
You using the term reference, learned friends all over the place. So it's traditionally channeled amongst between counsel and were you referring to counsel or to the court officers or registry?
Sorry, I was referring to the bench, Your Honours.
All right.
But pointing out that if there is any problem, it can be admitted later. Maybe the court officer can clarify.
Yes, court officer will give an evidence reference number as the document has been admitted onto the record as exhibit.
Mr. President, just for clarity, much as we have been served with this CD-ROM, we really have not seen it. We don't know what is contained in it. And I just leave it at that.
Noted. It's good for you to note that now, in case it needs to be addressed later.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Kigen-Katwa, the same with you?
Yes, Mr. President, but I took Mr. Steinberg's word that it relates to the material that they already disclosed to us.
Sometimes we must do that as lawyers, amongst ourselves, yes.
Le document
Document KenOTP 01300038 will have the EVD number, EVD-T OTP 00058.
Thank you, Your Honours, and that brings to the conclusion my evidence in chief. I thank the witness for his patience.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Mr. Fowle, Mr. Kigen-Katwa. Mr. Fowle, you're going first?
Yes, Mr. President.
And how long do you think you will be with the witness? Noting the extent of the testimony.
I was thinking that I would take no more than an hour, but the use of the documents may make it a little difficult. So I may just be a little over an hour or a little less.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Bromley. It's nice seeing you again. You will recall that we had met in my previous life as team leader for Darfur investigations and senior trial lawyer for Darfur. Do you remember that?
Yes, it was long ago, but I remember.
And during those periods, we discussed the possibility of using satellite imagery and remote sensing for the Darfur investigations. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you would therefore agree with me that the Kenya cases are not your first interaction with the Office of the Prosecutor. Is that right?
Correct. Well, yes, that's correct.
And your interaction with the Office of the Prosecutor dates as far back as 2009 or thereabouts, possibly earlier.
Yes, I mean, at the time, I was never requested to do anything by the Office of the Prosecutor. We were essentially volunteering information from the organization I worked for and another NGO.
With regards to your instructions on this case, do you recall when you were first instructed?
On this particular case, it essentially, it was my organization, UNISAT, was first instructed in late 2011, as far as I know. However, we had a staff change and a communication problem, so the issue did not come to me until, I want to say, September, October of 2012. But that's when the original emails were basically forwarded to me.
And your instructions included using remote sensing data to detect fires, did it not?
Yeah, I think the original emails made reference to what UNISAT had produced during the post-election period, and we're making reference to that and asking for more information. What I think happened was I then volunteered the results of a fire analysis system that I had created while at UNISAT, but dating all the way back to 2008.
And in addition to remote sensing data to detect fires, you also analyzed satellite imagery for the purposes of providing evidence of burning or destruction of property.
Correct.
You also looked into information pertaining to travel time from particular or identified locations. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And your instructions also included looking at imagery for the purposes of detecting large gatherings. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Were you provided with information on which particular gatherings you were to look for?
In the letter of instruction, there were specific locations under the heading large, relating to crowds or large gatherings.
Did you take steps to obtain imagery for large gatherings for the dates and places mentioned in the letter of instruction?
As detailed, I think, in Appendix A of several of the reports, all of those locations, as far as I remember, did not have relevant imagery that had been acquired at the time. So therefore, there was nothing for me to obtain.
Good. Your report, one of your reports deals with using MODIS in order to detect fires. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you would agree that there are problems with this method or using MODIS in order to discover fires. Is that right?
As I said before, if a fire is not detected, does not mean it did not occur. It means something interfered or the satellite wasn't overhead. But if a fire is detected, it's reasonably certain that a fire did occur.
But you would agree with me that the results that are produced are sometimes ambiguous. Is that right?
Yes, your detecting a fire. You don't know the source of the fire or many other details about the fire. And if the satellite is not overhead or if there's cloud cover when the fire is burning, it would not be detected. So that's what we call normal technical limitations.
And in page 3 of your report, contained in tab 4 of the OTP bundle, that is Ken OTP 00920884, you stated as follows: analysis of fire detections in Eldoret, Kenya, that is the name of the report. You said that review of the location of each fire detection using imagery from Google Earth indicates that the majority of such detections are in heavily agricultural woodland areas, leading to some ambiguity as to the likely source of the detection. Do you remember saying that in your report?
Yes.
And would you say that that finding is correct?
Basically, the imagery on Google Earth may or may not have extended back to the time period in question. So the imagery that was available on Google Earth at the time that I looked at it was indicating agricultural areas or woodland areas.
And therefore, the results would be ambiguous. Is that right?
Without really further investigating the conditions of each fire detection at the time it was detected and the terrain as it existed at that time, which I simply didn't have the time for. Based on just a quick review on Google Earth, and that statement's accurate.
So in fact, you are suggesting that a more detailed assessment of each of these locations was necessary for you to be able to come up with conclusive findings. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, more time is always good.
Were you in fact given this time to do it?
No, there was a deadline for all this work. It was a considerable amount of work, and we had other projects and deadlines at the time. I gave it as much attention as I could at the time.
Such analysis would have been helpful to the judges in arriving at their findings at the end of the day as to the existence of some of these fires and their likely cause, would it not?
Possibly.
In a sense, we are saying that some helpful work that needed to have been done to better the understanding of the judges of what actually happened was in fact not done. Is that right?
It's impossible to say how helpful it would have been. It depends on what imagery would have been available. It would essentially constitute an additional analysis. But without starting the analysis, you can't say what might be possible.
But Mr. Bromley, it was your assessment that a detailed assessment of each location would have been helpful. Is that not the case?
It certainly would have been helpful to answer the question about whether there was more to be found there, but I can't say what the results of it would have been.
Indeed. But this more helpful, detailed assessment of each location was not done due to time constraints. That's the case, isn't it?
Correct.
You have used Moody's in order to compare fires detected in Eldoret over a 10-year period. Is that right?
Yes.
And according to your report that is contained in tab 4 of the binder, you have noticed a spike in fires on 1 January 2007. Is that right?
Yes.
2008, Your Honor.
2008. Excuse me, 2008, my mistake. And that same report also suggests in Figure 4 that there was a rather high level of fire on 2nd January 2006. Is that right?
Correct.
And in fact, unless I read the chart wrongly, it appears that there were 9 fires on 2nd January 2006. Is that right?
Correct.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at tab 4. That is figure tab 4 of the OTP binder, and that is figure.
On what page?
At 889, 0889. It's a chart which shows the spikes in fires. And you would notice that on 2nd January 2006, there is a sharp spike in fires. Is that right?
Yes.
And do we know what is responsible for that? Do you have any information?
No.
But you would agree with me that this is an aberration compared to what happened in previous years. Is that right?
At that point, it was the largest number of fires detected in a single day. Yes. So.
But you would agree with me that there was no known violent conflict that occurred in Kenya on this date, 2nd January 2006.
I wouldn't know what was happening on that day at that location.
Good. I now move on to your observations with regards to satellite imagery using the QuickBird images that you analyzed. And you would agree with me that certain factors create uncertainty in the results of the analysis. Is that right?
For the class of possibly destroyed buildings seen in the imagery, yes. And in general, the fact that you're looking at a satellite image is, of course, not the same as standing on the ground right there.
And some of these factors include the imagery extent, the quality, the severity of the burning, the building materials used in the structure, vegetation, or construction activities. All this may affect the way in which an imagery is analyzed, or in fact the conclusions that are arrived at. Is that right?
Again, in this case, the imagery extent wouldn't be an issue because the extent is what we analyzed. We had imagery for that extent. I think what I meant with that statement is sometimes there's simply no imagery available for the extent that you want to look at. The other factors would have influenced, again, the possibly destroyed structures, but less so the definitively destroyed structures.
And that is why, in your report, you identified certain structures as definitely destroyed, and with regards to other structures, you gave a qualified opinion. Is that right?
Correct.
And it seems that from your report, it's only the red dots that can reliably be said to have been definitely destroyed. Is that right?
As indicated, yes.
So your finding with regards to the yellow dots are not conclusive. Is that right?
It's standard in imagery analysis to identify the things you're less certain about. So it's kind of a normal practice for us to indicate the level of uncertainty. The alternative is to essentially give a false impression of confidence in some areas. So yeah, wherever possible, I will make it clear where the findings are perhaps subject to a little bit more uncertainty.
So therefore, the finding as to possibly destroyed buildings can only be relied on to the extent of the caveat that it is possibly, or these are possibly destroyed, and not necessarily definitively destroyed, and as such should be taken as that.
I think the best thing to do would be analyze each of the possibly destroyed locations, and multiple analysts might identify which ones they were certain about, and then identify which ones they're not. But yeah, based on my review, these were possibly destroyed as opposed to definitively destroyed.
In fact, you are suggesting that that extra work that would have enabled you to state a more definitive conclusion was not done.
It wouldn't really be necessary, or that sort of work is rarely done in any situation where you have a deadline.
Okay.
You can't, yeah.
Therefore, with regards to these 190 buildings, you cannot state beyond reasonable doubt that they were in fact destroyed. Is that right?
There were three classes of possibly destroyed. Of those three classes, possibly half or more than half I would feel stronger about or less strong, but it's again standard in imagery analysis to have this possible class, just to err on the side of caution.
That is the point, is it not? And that is why you cannot state beyond reasonable doubt that these yellow dots represent structures that were actually destroyed.
Yes, there is some doubt there.
You have compared two images, or two imageries, the 14th March 2006 and the 4th January 2008 imageries. Is that right?
Yes, for the Eldoret analysis, I believe.
Yes. And you would agree with me that the structures that appeared burned or destroyed in the 208 imagery may have been destroyed due to other factors other than post-election violence. Is that right?
That would be a lot of speculation on my part. I was asked to look for indications of burning using the imagery I could get. I can tell you that the vast majority of the structures were indeed burned at a date relatively close to the date of the image acquisition.
I can accept that. I can accept that. And in your report, that is contained in tab 2, you indicated, this is at page 938, the equal ERN reference is KEN-0092-0391 at 938. At 939, is it? Okay. And you state as follows: results of analysis on modus fire detections occurring from 1 to 4th January 2008 in Eldoret area are somewhat ambiguous due to their proximity to agricultural fields. Specifically, 5 detections occurred within the Eldoret analysis area on 1 January 2008, and 1 detection occurred on 3rd January 2008. No fire detections occurred on 2nd January 2008, possibly due to light cloud cover in the Eldoret area on that day. Of the 5 detections occurring on 1 January, 2 of them, ID numbers 20863 and 20864, occur in an area which indicates very recent burning of fields in the satellite image from 4 January 2008. And these detections are possibly due to agricultural burning. The 3 additional detections on 1 January 2008, ID numbers 20821, 20862, and 20865, indicate both burned homes and agricultural burning as of 4 January 2008. And thus, fire detections could be due to either factor. Do you recall that?
Yes, and that's also expressed in Table 2.
Now we want to understand what you have stated in this part of the report. And I recall that my learned friend opposite has taken you through tab 6 of the OTP bundle. It's a document that looks like this. And the ERN number is KEN-OTP 0092-0957. Do you remember that document?
Yes.
Could you please take a look? Could you turn to the OTP binder tab 6 and refer to that document? And you indicated certain ID numbers on the document. Do you see those ID numbers?
Yes.
Am I correct in saying that the areas shaded pink and given ID numbers represent those areas you referred to as having been burnt due to agricultural activity?
No. The pink areas are the approximate extent of the pixel of which the modus fire detection is the center. And there's no indication of the source of the burning.
I am trying to understand what is contained in the report. And let's take, for instance, ID number 20883. And according to the report, let's take ID number 20863, which is to the bottom left of the document. Is it correct to say that MODIS detected fire in this particular area at a time when there was agricultural burning? Is that right?
You can't say whether it was agricultural burning. MODIS detected a fire in that area on 1 January 2008 at the indicated time. Beyond that, you would look at the additional satellite imagery and determine what the cause of burning might be.
Let's go back to the segment of the report that I have read out, and we try to dissect what is stated there. And
At tab 2, you mean?
We go back to the last paragraph of the page ending 938. That is page 6 of the report, tab 2. And let me just remind you of what you said. You said of the 5 detections occurring on 1 January, 2 of them, ID numbers 20863 and 20864, occur in an area which indicates very recent burning of fields in the satellite imagery. And these detections are possibly due to agricultural burning.
Correct.
Correct. And let us identify those two locations, 20863 and 20864. 20863 would be at the bottom left of the document. Is that right?
Yes.
And 20864 would be towards the middle, that is between Kimumu and Yamumbi. Is that right?
Correct.
And the burning detected on these two places could have been due to agricultural activity.
Correct.
So now let's move on to the other three, 20821, 20862, and 20865. And your finding was that they indicate burned homes and agricultural burning. Burned homes and agricultural burning. Is that right?
Correct.
And your conclusion with regards to those ones is that the fire detected could have been either arson or agricultural burning. Is that right?
Correct.
And the places that we are referring to are 0821, that is around Kimumu area, that is the top right-hand corner of the report. ID 20821. Is that right?
Correct.
And the other area we are talking about is 20862, which is located just to the left, bottom left of the report, but above 20863.
Correct.
And all these burnings could have been as a result of agricultural burning. Is that right?
Yes.
And the other area that you have identified is 20865, which is above Huruma to the left.
Yes.
That is just a little above the middle to the left.
Yes.
So we are saying that these 5 detections of fire could have been as a result of agricultural burning. We would now move on and talk about some of these areas that you are supposed to examine. You talked about Kiamba. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Perhaps before that, I would take you through this report that has been admitted in evidence. It is KEN-OTP 0092-1514, which is a report of the chronology of fires in the Rift Valley province. I cannot recall which tab it was in the OTP binder.
Mr. Fall, Monsieur Fall, excusez-moi, les interprètes.
I beg your pardon. The interpreters are reminding you not to rustle the document so close to the microphone it is interfering with their work.
Thank you very much for that reminder. I will pay attention to that. This is tab 8 of the OTP binder. It is a chronology of fires in the Rift Valley province. And if you look at the box below the first one to the left, the one dated 29 to 30 December 2007. Have you seen it?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that this particular map shows fires in several places in the Rift Valley and in the Western Province and in Nyanza, and even Central Province, right?
As far as I can tell, yes.
It shows fires in Soy, near Kakamega, near Turbo. Soy, you would see it in the middle between Kitale and Eldoret.
Okay.
It also shows fires in Nyanza. Is that right? Nyanza province, around Kisumu area.
Correct.
It also shows fires in Equator.
Correct.
It also shows fires in Nakuru.
Correct.
And these fires are supposed to have occurred between 29 and 30 December 2007.
Correct.
And if you look at the next one, and then the one above it, you would see that apart from Eldoret, there were also fires in other places, like Kaptumo, Muhoroni, and other parts of the Rift Valley. Is that right, the top one?
Correct.
We would move on to Kiamba. When you analyze the data with regards to Kiamba, were you provided with information?
Yes. 1 second. We may have overrun our time.
I am sorry, Mr. President. I was under the impression that we were going to stop at 4:30, but
Where did you get that impression?
I don't want to point to anyone. I was under the mistaken impression. Blame it on me, Mr. President. So in that case, I crave on your indulgence to finish tomorrow. Thank you.
You will finish tomorrow.
Thank you.
We will adjourn now for the day, and witness will you rejoin us at 9:30 tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All rise. We will wait.